Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off. It's the month of April and it's the year 1995. And for the magazines that I'm hoping are not going to make a fool of us are the One For Amiga, Amiga Power and Amiga Action. Fight! We start with Amiga Power, that provided two very full discs as we have 4 PD games and 2 demos. Starting with disc 1, we get, in its own words, a shabby menu, and all it's really doing is asking if you want to play the game. If not, it'll move on to the next, and then it'll tell you off for not making your mind. Going with the first game, and we get Tank, or as the menu magazine likes to call it, Tank-Ed. I think it's meant to be tanked. The menu is a little basic looking, but to be honest, so is the game. It's a multiplayer style thing that lets you have 4 people trying to battle it out at once. This is over 2 with joysticks and 2 with the keyboard. So obviously, I'm going to be showing this game off to its absolute best. Weirdly though, as you can see, there's 3 colours and 4 tanks. Why they went with 2 red ones, I'm not sure. You thought they could have easily had a 4th colour? But no, I don't know if there's possibly some colourblind issues going on with the designers, and they thought they had 4 colours. But the basic goal is to, well, take out the other tanks and be the last one standing. But the twist here is that the bullets bounce. Or it would be a twist if we hadn't seen a similar game like this before. But what they have done differently is that you have a limited amount of ammo. So by default, one tank can't take out all the others. But there seems there's no real way of knowing how many shells you actually have left. So you might just start to attack a tank and then you start spinning on the spot and explode because you are empty. It's an odd system, and thankfully you can change some of the settings so you can turn that off, as well as trying a number of different maps. So it's an interesting bit of PD. So I'll put it in the "it would be fun if I had mates around to play," but not much in the single player category. The first demo of the episode is for Super Loops, an AGA only follow-up to Loops, which I never played, so all this is new to me. And this seems to be a Tetris Pipe Dream style combo, in which you have to place pipes on the grid, and if you make loops, then they'll vanish and you'll get points. Which is all presented in this very arcade puzzler styling. Sort of like something you'd see out of a Neo Geo puzzle arcade game, with animations going on in the background as well. The controls take a little bit to get used to, as it's been geared around a single button joystick, as you move the pieces round with the main stick, but you have to hold fire and press right to rotate it, and then hold down fire and press left to drop it. It's a little bit clunky, but it does work and you get used to it after a while, but the muscle memory very quickly fades, so when you come back it can feel a bit weird again. It doesn't take long to really notice the main problems with the game, as when you play Tetris it lets you see the next item. In Pipe Dreams, or Mania if you prefer, it would show you the next few pieces. This lets you plan. But here, you don't get that, so it's all reactionary. Plus, there's a timer for dropping each part on the board, so you're always being pushed to place it and move on. The demo is for the arcade mode, that I think requires you to clear a set number of loops before you can go on to the next level. But I'm not 100% sure on this, as it doesn't really say anywhere what the complete condition is. But when you do hit it, then you'll get to play a bonus round, where the loops won't vanish, so instead you have to try and fit them in best you can. The game is interesting, as there's a few extras that you can do, like getting these special pieces that will clear incomplete loops, but I don't think it's better than either of its inspirations. And I'm not really sure that this is pushing the AGA chipset either, or even the SNES where it also came out on. The next PD game is Space War, which seems to be another multiplayer game, and one that starts right away. Each player controls a ship, one of which seems very familiar, and you have to fly around space shooting at each other to try and destroy them. But the big difference here is that sun in the middle of the map, and its gravity, which is affecting everything, and if you touch it, then you die. On the default settings, you might die quite a few times before you get the hang of the controls, as the gravity is very strong and it's just pulling you in from the start. But you can change that in the settings. Annoyingly though, there seems to be options for a computer controlled player, but it's greyed out, so you can't select it. I'm not sure if this was something they planned but never put in, or if this is possibly shareware, but I didn't notice anything about how to buy the full title. This has a real Gravity Wars vibe to it, particularly in the graphics and the physics, to the point where I was wondering if it was made by the same people. But as it stands, it's a hard one to really play, more so than the other multiplayer games we've seen, because everything's happening at once and the gravity is pulling you straight away. Which means the looking decent in multiplayer but not so much single player pile is really growing. Hopefully the second disc will be more promising, as it's where we're going next. And first up is Master Blaster. And yes, this is yet another multiplayer focused PD game. This one is quite obviously based on Bomberman, or as we knew it on the Amiga, Dynablaster. And at first glance, it looks like there might be a few graphics that were borrowed from that game, as I swear those bombs look identical. But they did put a bit more effort into the characters, as they look far more unique than the originals, as it's not just a few different colours. And is it me, or does that bottom right one look a little bit like Duke Nukem? The game includes all the usual power-ups, like getting extra bombs or extending the range, but you might find one that will allow you to walk through the walls, or even punch a wall. Another shake-up to the gameplay comes in the form of coins, and these get to be used in the shop in between the rounds that you can use to buy equipment for your next go. So I can't really complain about the amount of features that they have added, or for the most part the graphics. It's a very well done multiplayer version of Dynablaster, even if it does have music that I thought initially was going to get me a copyright strike, but I think it's just different enough. So let's move on to the next demo, which is Rockets. And really, it's another multiplayer focused demo. Are you really wanting me to feel like I'm a knobby no mates here, Amiga Power? Well, yes, this is another two-player ship combat game with gravity, but it also has a hint of lander thrown in as well, as you have to guide your ship around these underground bases to try and attack the other player. But this time it's all drawn with this pre-rendered look, and it was sold as shareware. The craft have a few weapons like an autocannon or a shotgun, but you have to push up and down to trigger them, with fire being used for the thrust. And I have to say, this really feels like a weird setup. Overall, it's okay I guess. You get used to the controls after a bit, but they never feel great. And I think I'd enjoy the other multiplayer games that we've seen today far more than this one, if just because those were free and this is a paid product. And the demo doesn't really show why this is going to be so much better than the others. So I think it's time we check out the final PD game that they included, Mega Squad, which rounds out what seems to be a multiplayer focused magazine, as it's yes, another two-player game. And it's got gameplay very similar to Rockets. With how low budget the cover disc menu was, and how full of PD games the discs were, I wonder if Amiga Power was having problems with getting content this month, as the games feel very similar to each other as well. Now I know by 1995 the Amiga was starting to struggle, but there was still some life left in the old format, so there should have been far more games that they could have gotten to cover these discs. But swinging back to the game, I think the only thing that really makes this different from the other games that we've seen is the tag mode, which is really difficult to show off on my own. So let's just watch the ships fly around and try and shoot each other in the duel mode. But it seems no matter which machine I play this on, I can't get them to hit each other. The magazine talks about having to turn off caches, but that's only on the 1200. But even on Amiga 500, I'm having this issue. So I wonder if there were some problems with this version. So let's move on to the next magazine, which is the One For Amiga, who came with 2 discs and only had 2 demos, the first of which is X-Fighter, a demo that we got to see in the Amiga answer to Street Fighter video. This is a beat 'em up, if the last sentence didn't tip you off. And it's also an unreleased game that got to the point of being reviewed by quite a few magazines, but then never got released. Amazingly, we actually have an AI opponent to play against, who will thankfully show off most of the moves that this game has to offer. Although, because both characters look identical, I could have said that I was showing them off and you'd have absolutely no idea if I was lying or not. As to be honest, I lose track of who is who here. Now, for what seems to be a one-man game, this isn't too bad. The movement isn't quite right, obviously, as you can see, but it's leagues ahead of the official Street Fighter ports. It moves fast, for one thing. The final game boasted quite the cast, 32 characters if the reviews are to be believed. And interestingly, this was only ever checked out on the CD32. Which makes it interesting that this demo can be played on any ECS or above Amiga. Now, I really like one of the modes that it has to offer, in which you have a single health bar that seesaws back and forth, a bit like a tug of war with the winner who sends the bar all the way to the other side. Now, the demo lets you experience both modes that the game has to offer, so this and a regular best of 3. Something I did notice while I was playing was the background slowly changing, and I think this is meant to give you a hint of the clock running down, as I did manage to lose a match without getting it all the way one way or the other, and I assume that we just ran out of time, because the background had changed. It would be really interesting if we could get the developer to release the final version online, but while we wait on that, let's check out the other disc which had a demo for Flight of the Amazon Queen, which was so big it needed to be extracted onto 2 discs. And after a quick intro in which our hero gets locked in a changing room that has a metal door and a prison style window for some reason, this place takes its security very seriously, we get to take control. And this, if you've not played it before, is a point and click adventure in the LucasArts style, just with icons rather than verbs. And for the most part, I think they're all quite self-explanatory. Our first goal in this quite reasonable demo is to make it out of this room, which is thankfully much easier than, say, Normality, which had the same problem. Just pick up a few bedsheets and then the exit below will become clear. But he's not stupid, he won't just jump down there. I do like how well drawn and animated this game is. It looks lovely, even if that does come with the downside of lots of disk swapping, which was definitely one of the big benefits of having a hard drive. And while I distinctly remember all the disk swapping that this and other adventure games had, one thing I had forgotten was the pauses when you triggered an action, as those had to be loaded from disk. And it can make you wonder, for a little while anyway, if you correctly did the action or not, even while you hear the drive ticking away. So finishing the demo will require a few changes, in more ways than one, so if you have multiple drives, this is the time to break them out and use them. as I think this is most, if not all of, the first part of the game, which acts as a very nice little sandbox to help you learn the controls and the systems that you'll have to deal with, as there's not really any way that you can lose. And there's a few nice touches that go along with this, like if you just try to escape, they will recognise you, and then they'll strip you of your jacket and trousers so you can't just keep running around. So really, you're going to have to find a way to disguise yourself. And after chatting with the bellhop, and then helping out an old flame while she's in the shower, a plan is formed. One that, well, it might get you arrested in more backwards parts of the world, let's just say. Now this is a great demo of a lovely game, and you can actually get it for free on ScumVM or GOG, so if you've not played this before, you really should check it out, even if it is the PC version with the talky voices. With that, we come to the last magazine, Amiga Action. And in their comic relief special, they have 4 discs with 2 demos, 4 PD games, and technically a full game. But we start off with the demo for Turbo Tracks, and this is a top-down racer. And we've seen more than a few of these on Cover This Face Off so far, to the point where I was actually worried that I might have seen this one before. But I don't think we have, it's just very familiar. This is a simple 1-level demo. That is really just a time trial as well, as there's no one to race against. So it's just you, the open road, some cash tokens, oil slicks and turbo boosts. It looks nice enough and moves well, so I can't really complain too much, not when the car rotates as smoothly as it does. But it does feel a little bit been there, done that. It might have been nice to see what else this game had to offer, like what you can spend the money on, or what other vehicles you might have to race in the full thing, as I'm guessing there's a few of them, judging by the title screen. But no, in the demo, you just get to repeat the same track for 6 laps. So it's nicely done, but from what I can see from the demo, it's nothing special. So let's move on to the PD games, all of which was supposedly made for Amiga Action. The first one being Space Invasion 2. And I think you can tell what this is, can't you? Yes, it's a clone of Space Invaders. That's taken its look from the version that had a reflective background, and really quite fitting to how I've seen it actually being played in the arcades. Unfortunately, I can't really say the same thing about the gameplay, as it really does feel off. The invaders move a little too fast and fire way too often. Like, they just fill the screen with bullets. And before you know it, they're already down onto the shields and hitting you with those lasers. So it's a shame that it's so close to being a really nice conversion. The shields break up quite nicely and you can shoot through them to get those free shots in, but due to how quickly everything moves, it's hard to stay still in that one spot. Surprisingly, I found it much easier to play with a mouse than a joystick. The second game is Dodgeum. This time it's a clone of Head On, which was a very early maze and dots game. It actually predated Pac-Man by a year. The goal, as you might expect, is to drive over all the dots. And between each section of the road, you get this limited time that you can change tracks. And you'll need to do this to avoid the other driver, whose only job it is to run into you. But you do have one extra trick up your sleeve, and that is you can speed up by holding the fire button. This seems to be unlimited and can be very useful to make sure you make it to a junction before they do. And with all that in mind, it's not too difficult to avoid them and to get all the dots. Now, outside the title screen, this feels a bit bare bones, and I feel they could have put a bit more effort into the car sprites, as you do get to see more of them as you go up through the levels. But as a simple clone of the arcade, it works quite well. Our third game from Kevin Gallagher is Galaxy Wars, and this one is a take on Galaxy Wars. I guess they couldn't or didn't need to come up with a different name for this one. Your task isn't, as I thought, to get your rocket off the top of the screen, but instead to take out those craft that you see flying at the very top. This is made harder by the fact that they're firing at you and the asteroids that are flying around. It's a simple concept with simple graphics to match. But I will say it's a shame that they didn't continue with the music in-game, as I think it would be much better than the annoying sound effect that they play while you're using the engines. And by the way, you don't have to keep firing the engines, you can stop if you think you're going to hit something. Overall, it's a fun little title, but not one to write home about. And I feel this brings us on to the final PD game that they provided, and it's Harry the Haddock. A mostly original game, though not with the music. As we can hear at the title screen, and then when we get into the game we have a platformer. That is just make your way to the exit, which is way over to the right. This is a seriously long level. And that means you'll get to hear this mod track version of Saturday Night pretty much constantly. Now, I can forgive many things in games. Bad graphics, poor controls, iffy ideas, but making me listen to a Wigfield song might be my limit. The game is mostly okay. The graphics don't always line up and the movement gets a little choppy in places, but it's not the worst game I've seen today. And with that ringing endorsement, we come on to the final demo, which is for the Spirus Legacy, an AGA only game that's a take on Zelda. And right away there's things here that will attack you, but thankfully you have a sword, which isn't quite long enough to reach it. But it's not too hard to find a route round and then take it out, as well as another snake that might get in your way. So far, so Zelda. You can also find and interact with NPCs that are just walking around. Now this is done by hitting the spacebar and then selecting an option. And wow, that's a portrait! I'm amazed that anyone would talk to our hero with such an angry looking face. But you've got a proper dialogue tree here that you can move your way through and ask them all sorts of questions. And you'll find quite a few people to chat with because the map is quite large, it seems, so there's a lot to explore. And there's even houses that you can enter, but you can't open those chests. That functionality seems to either not be there or locked off. Now there really isn't much of a goal or anything to really do in the demo. You can just wander around and just explore and just check out what it can do. I guess there was still quite a lot of work that was required on the game, and this supposedly was one of the first views that people ever got of it as well, so it could have been quite early on in development. But I have to say, this looks quite lovely, and it moves nicely as well. You even get an inventory with lots of fun items that you can mess around with. Well, you can at least look at. I've not worked out how you can trigger any of them, if you can in the demo. The whole thing looks really quite interesting, and I think I might have to give it a proper look at some point. The final disc is a little bit odd, as it's technically a full copy of The Blues Brothers. But when you start it up, you'll get this screen, which gives you a code and a phone number that you need to call to pay for the game and thus get an unlock number. Now I'm not sure how much it cost at the time, as all it really tells us is £4 worth would go to Comic Relief, so it would be interesting to find out if anyone has cracked this version. and worked out if it has just a single built-in number that you have to type in, or if it's something more intelligent. But seeing that this is a Titus game, I'm not really expecting too much. Although in saying that, I do actually like this game, which for now I've switched to a regular copy just to show it off, as it's in that same mould as Mario 2, or quite possibly the same engine as Titus the Fox, in which you have to pick up objects and throw them at the enemies. Which for the most part in this level means throwing boxes. And right from the off, it is an interesting bunch that you're fighting against. You have the guards, the grannies in the shopping trolleys, and these women throwing dishes at you. The goal is a simple one, just make it to the exit. But I think as you can tell from all the various groups trying to stop you, this won't be easy or straightforward. But it will be interesting and I think a lot of fun, as you have balloons to ride on, conveyor belts to deal with, and fish tanks to swim through. All while a great version of the movie's music is playing along. There is also a hidden instrument in every single level. That might be difficult to find because in this level you can actually travel into some of the shops, and it might be hidden in one of those. But as good as this game is, I don't think it would be fair to include it as part of the rankings, as really this is a paid extra. Which means we now get to move on to decide who is the winner. And I don't think it's going to come as any surprise who is in last place. It's Amiga Power. So much multiplayer games, and it just felt a little bit thrown together for my taste. In second place, I'm gonna give it to Amiga Action. The Sparus Legacy was interesting, but Harry the Haddock's music, that cannot be forgiven. Which means the one gets a surprise win with its just 2 demos. Flight of the Amazon Queen was easily the best of the episodes, and X-Fighter, while not great, was fun. And there we have it. Hopefully you agree with me, and you're not currently doing that dance. But if you want to let me know either way, then you can do down in the comments or on my Discord. We're a friendly bunch over there. And until next time, I was the Goldfish. That was Saturday Night Dancing Like the Way You... Oh! And this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, then you're in luck, as I've made quite a few of these videos already. So you can check them out, and they should be on the screen right now. Or you can use the buttons just under the video to feed the almighty YouTube algorithm, as we're all subjects to its whims.